Welcome to the RotoWire NFL show. I'm Adam Zdroik, joined by Ryan Belongi. I'm stepping in for Scott Genstead today. He is, we're going on Thanksgiving. It's Friday. It's the day after Thanksgiving, so someone had to step in for him. I'm stepping in for him. I am the soccer editor at RotoWire, but I do I do tango with NFL DraftKings and FanDuel a little bit, but for yesterday, there's a lot of points in Thursday's Thanksgiving games. Ryan, I had a lineup that involved Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, and unfortunately, I went Gabe Davis over Isaiah McKenzie. Just a couple bad plays. Did you have any success yesterday?
I did not have any success yesterday. I pretty much jammed Gabe Davis. I was under on Justin Jefferson, and also I didn't have any McKenzie with all the Bill stacks I have. Of course, I didn't get to McKenzie, so wasn't a great day for me either. But we have another slate on Sunday. We can get it back.
Yeah, let's do it. But before we get there, it's easy to find Derrick Henry's statistics from this year. With a quick Google search and a visit to Pro Football Reference, you can see that he's rushed for over 900 yards and 9 touchdowns. But that raises more questions. How many other players have hit those marks through 9 games? How many did it at Henry's age? To answer those questions, there's StatHead. StatHead is your all-access pass to the Pro Football Reference database. In StatHead, you can compare up to 6 player stats side by side to determine who to start and who to sit, or you can dig through advanced stats to find the perfect player to add off waivers. There's an array of simple tools that unlock an endless number of search options, all using the same easy-to-use interface that you already know from Pro Football Reference. Plus, StatHead lets you browse Pro Football Reference ad-free. Sign up with the promo code ROTOWIRE for $20 off an annual subscription to StatHead. So, Sunday slate, we got 11 games on it. And if you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, we have the odds up. The odds on our NFL odds page. And two things stand out to me. There's a lot of pretty low over-unders here. Pretty low totals here. You usually get, maybe 1 or 2 games that are over 50 points on the over under. I'm seeing the highest right now. We're sitting at about 48. But the 2 games that stand out to me, we got Cardinals, Chargers, Raiders, Seahawks, both late games. Are those the two ones we're probably going to be focusing on the most in the show?
Yeah, for the most part. I think you nailed it. I think this is the first slate where we haven't had a 50-point total that I can remember. So, a lot of low totals. Those 2 games you mentioned, the 48 totals in the afternoon, they also have the closest spreads. So, I do think people will look to those games for stacks. I think there's a couple other ones maybe we could target. I see the Dolphins have a 30.5 implied total for a really good matchup against Houston. That game has a 14-point spread, and a lot of people don't like to target games with spreads like that just because of the blowout risk. And but I think it'll keep the ownership somewhat down on the Dolphins side, and there's a few pieces on the Texans that you could run it back with. But I think, there's not many appealing games on the slate. All these other totals are 43, 42, even less than that. So I think people will heavily focus on those afternoon games.
Yeah, we got these two that are at 38 and under. We have the Justin Fields question mark going against the Jets, and Broncos against Panthers. Won't be talking about those games very much. There's not a ton to say about them, but for quarterback here, we're going to start here at quarterback. If you see our graphic on YouTube, we're highlighting Kyler Murray going against this Chargers defense. Kyler Murray, I think the question here is he's 6,800, but he's coming off a hamstring injury, and sometimes you're playing Murray just to get those extra rushing yards. We saw it on Thanksgiving. You play Josh Allen, he was max price. You play him to get those rushing yards because he adds that little boost. I think whatever he had, 70, 80 rushing yards. That's kind of what you want with Murray. But are you kind of worried about that hamstring injury at all?
Yeah, it's nice to see him without an injury designation. The reason I decided to highlight Murray is because we look at his salary the whole season: 7,400, 7,500, 7,400, 7,400, 7,600. So this is a big drop. I mean, and that's why he projects well. He's in the highest total game. He has rushing upside. But so just in general, before we break this down, we just had the Thursday night slate, yesterday on Thanksgiving. And for this weekend slate, there's not really any projections out yet. There's definitely not ownership projections out. So it's a little tougher to know where people are going to go in cash games at the moment, especially because there's some key injuries that we'll talk about later. But yeah, back to quarterback. I think, Justin Fields is obviously question number one. He's been great recently. Obviously, 5 straight games with at least 22 fantasy points. Last week was the week I decided to jump off, and it did not work out. I went to Allen, like quite a few people did. Allen had like a 12-point floor game. Fields did fine. This one, man, I love the rushing upside, but it's an expensive price tag for a team with a 16. What's their total? For a team with
they're
16
6-point dogs, so.
Yeah, a total just over 16. I mean, the Jets defense is really good. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, yeah, what do you think about Fields? Like, I think people will still go there in cash. Not as many, and maybe not as so much in the higher stakes, but I don't know. He's been good.
I don't think so. 7,400. I know it's a shoulder issue, so that's fine for those rushing stats that you're basically relying on with him. But you just look at the matchup, and I think the Jets have a pretty good defense. I think they're fast enough to where they're basically going to focus around stopping that. And I mean, at this point, it used to be a thing where Fields was so cheap that you couldn't afford to fade him at all. But now he's 7,400 to where you can get guys like Murray and Tua that are cheaper than him, who have better matchups than he does. So, I mean, you're paying for the rushing yards. You're basically paying for 80 rushing yards and a touchdown to 80 rushing yards and a touchdown for him right there. Is it worth it? Probably not. I mean,
Probably not, right?
Yeah,
because if you don't get that, you're just dead. I mean, he hasn't been passing for many yards, so you can't really expect to get there on that. Yeah, I agree with you. I'll just close it off with it, and this is the reason I'm going to fade him. That matchup has the biggest mismatch in offensive defensive line on the slate. The Jets have the 5th ranked defensive line, and the Bears, I think, are second last. They're 31st ranked offensive line. So yeah, I mean, I like the Bears defense in that matchup. Should be some sacks, and yeah, too expensive for Fields in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I guess just going down, let's see what the other options are. I do like Kyler though at that price tag. Going down, Geno Smith and Tom Brady, just because they're cheap, will have decent projections. I mean, it's really weird to see Brady at 5,800. It's still not something that I really ever do in cash games, but he's never been below 6K. So he's going to have a good projection. I could see people maybe doing that. I don't think people will go below that though. I don't know. What do you think? Did I miss anybody or?
No, I think there's all these guys that stand out. Below Brady, I guess you have Derek Carr right here against the Seahawks defense, but Seahawks, they've been okay defensively, but just Derek Carr is too unreliable, really, especially for cash games. I think Brady's almost kind of too unreliable for cash games as well.
I agree.
Mean, playing at Cleveland, I don't know what the weather is, but anytime you're going at Cleveland, it's just like, especially with Brady, with how he's looked, it is off the bye, and people are like, yeah, Brady off the bye, okay, the Bucks are gonna turn it around, they're gonna turn into whatever they were 2 years ago, kind of a thing. I guess if you want to play, if you're in that mindset, you can go there, but I'm not sure you need to really. Or
you're right. I don't think you need to. I think we're gonna have enough value on this slate where I'm not going to go below Kyler. I don't see a need to in cash games. I mean, you want those raw points at quarterback, and I think Kyler's got good value and good upside.
Yeah, so running back time.
Running backs, yeah. Running backs is interesting. We're not going to pay up for any of these guys in cash. There's some mid-range guys that are going to be pretty good value. I think like starting with Josh Jacobs, I'm probably not going to go that high, but he's been getting so much volume that he projects so well. I mean, if you look at the game log, 27 touches last week, 27 touches the week before. I mean, still involved in the passing game. That's just so much volume. So I think it'll start with Josh Jacobs, at least the consideration. And then going down, Kenneth Walker in that nice game, Seattle and Vegas. Kenneth Walker, people are going to see 6 receptions on 8 targets last week. We already loved him as a rusher, but when he's involved in the passing game now, and there's no reason that he shouldn't be involved in the passing game. I think he just sort of wasn't when he first started playing, but he was good at catching passes in college. So I think,
Michigan
Kenneth
State,
Walker.
what up?
Yeah. So I think Kenneth Walker is a pretty good option. Going down, James Conner is going to be in consideration because the matchup is so good. Teams really target the Chargers. The Chargers have a really bad run defense. Conner's been catching passes. That's one of the better games to target. And then who will be the most popular? Well, depending, is going to be Jeff Wilson, actually, I think, at least right now, because it looks like Mostert's going to be out. The Texans have the worst run defense in the league. We talk about it every week. Wilson's coming off 119 yards against Cleveland and a touchdown, and he's been catching passes. And I mean, if Mostert's out, Wilson will be a lock, just a lock in that matchup, especially, 14-point spread. It's going to favor the running game. And one more guy, here's some important injury news to monitor, is going to be Fournette. Fournette questionable. He was injured last game, and we saw Rashad White. Yeah, Rashad White. He's looked really good too, and he had 22 carries for 105 yards last week. And he's been catching passes before that too. I mean, if Fournette was to be out, then just a complete lock, obviously, for 5,100. So I think that's the stuff to pay attention to. I don't know. I went through that kind of quick. Maybe I forgot someone. What do you think?
I think you said it on the top. It's just why spend up on some of these guys when we have the Wilsons and Whites. I mean, Wilson was already his first game with the Dolphins. Like, he was already taking carries from Mostert, and then if you throw an injury in, it almost seemed like he was already the number one guy. He kind of stole that job pretty quickly. So you got to think he's going to get a lot of carries against the Texans.
Yeah, and that's a good point. No, that's a good point. He's a good play regardless of whether Mostert plays or not. I mean, you're right. He is already the number one back. Mostert is playing like a secondary role. At least he has been.
I was just eyeing like James Conner because he's going against the Chargers, who can't stop the run against anyone. But again, he's in this 6,600 range to where, do you want to spend the money on someone like James Conner only because of matchup? Maybe, but it's still a little higher up than you'd want to spend on him, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess if Fournette were to play and you don't have the Rashad White value, I mean, you might be able to consider him as a last piece. I mean, yeah, it is a good matchup. He does score a lot of touchdowns. He does catch passes. And just in general, people might look at, I'm not saying to play Conner, but just if you were going to play Conner, you might see Kyler Murray and Conner and think, oh, I don't know, quarterback and running back in cash games. It's fine in cash games in a situation like this when both are a good price and both are in one of the best games on the slate.
Do you think Jacobs and Walker are going to be less popular than we'd think otherwise? Like, how much are people going to put into this weather? Someone's asking us in the chat. It's 44 degrees, slight chance of a rain. Are people going to put a lot into that, and maybe they're actually going to just plug these running backs in because of the cold, because of the possible rain? It's like, okay, they're going to run a little more.
I think that's a good point. It definitely favors the backs a little. I think it's just going to depend on what cheap value we have. But I think people will definitely play one back from that game, possibly two, but I think definitely one back from that game because Yeah, no one's going to fade Jeff Wilson, I don't think. But yeah, the weather in that game probably is going to help the running backs.
I think I have to mention one more guy. So Cam Akers is apparently the starter again for the Rams, going against the Chiefs. The Rams don't really have an offensive line, but the only way I think the Rams have a chance to stay in this game is if they just try to run the ball, get the clock moving, kind of a thing, instead of getting Stafford beat up, or I guess whoever's going to be their quarterback beat up, kind of a thing. But 4,900 for Akers. I mean, it's behind a bad offensive line, but I guess this is more of a tournament play kind of a thing. But you have any thoughts on the Ram
I actually
situation?
think I actually think it's a good tournament play, because just no one's really going to do it, and he's so cheap. He could just bust one off. I mean, there's always a chance that he could rush for 100 yards here, even though, like you said, bad offensive line. But they don't have a quarterback. I mean, they don't have anything else. In terms of cash games and just that game in general, the Rams 13.5 implied total is, I think, the lowest of the season. Um,
It's
and
wild.
just a quick note on that. The Chiefs defense for 2,800 is just the defense for cash games. I mean, at home against that Rams team. But yeah, Akers in tournaments to be, no one would know to roster him. So yeah, it makes sense for the large field stuff.
Another guy off injury, so Gus Edwards looks like he's going to be back, probably splitting some kind of role with Kenyon Drake. Both those guys, 5,700, 5,600, going against the Jags. Ravens haven't really looked that good, that explosive lately, but it is against the Jags. So, what are your thoughts on playing probably
Yeah.
Edwards over Drake? But do you have a preference between those two?
Yeah, I think it would have to be Edwards over Drake, but just in general, I don't really want any part of the Ravens.
Yeah.
They've been pretty disappointing. Um, yeah, I think I'm just gonna be off the Ravens.
All right. So for wide receiver, we got all the big names up top, Hill and Adams. Hopkins is kind of intriguing here, 7,700. Who are the guys that stand out here?
Yeah, wide receiver is interesting. Um, is there one guy that like absolutely stands out for cash games?
I honestly think Keenan Allen kind of stands out because he's 6,100.
That's exactly who I was gonna say. When you asked me who we should put on the cover of this podcast, he was almost who I went with. Um, Yep, Keenan Allen, I think, is the cash game play. And there would be no question if Mike Williams gets ruled out. We'll talk a little more about that game later. But yeah, it's just too cheap for Allen, because he hasn't really played much this season and he just came back. So I think Allen, yeah, he looks like the first guy in for me. Um, I don't think you're going to be able to spend all the way up, and I just probably doesn't make sense for cash games. The guy, maybe if we get enough value, you mentioned Hopkins. That's probably the highest you'd go. A ton of volume for Hopkins. 12 targets in 4 of 5 games. So yeah, I really like Hopkins for tournaments. Not sure you're gonna be able to get there in cash games. Other guys who look pretty good. People will consider Chris Godwin for 6K. It's too cheap. It's too cheap for the volume he gets, actually. I think he'll be relatively popular. And then I also think McLaurin could be relatively popular. He was like sort of the chalk last week and disappointed. Only 4 catches, 55 yards. But people liked that price tag last week, and now he's 100 cheaper. And the matchup against Atlanta is one of the better matchups in football for the passing game usually. So I think that range right there is strong. Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin. There's probably a few other guys too.
Yeah, that range right there around the 6K. Like these Seahawks guys are in here as well. Lockett and
Hmm.
Metcalf are right here. There's what Amari Cooper. Everyone knows his home away splits, and I guess technically last week's game was on the road, but they're at home against the Bucks, who their defense is getting a little healthier, and I think they showed up in their last game at least against the run. And I mean, as we saw in years past for the Bucks, teams just kind of avoid running the ball against them. I'm not saying obviously the Browns aren't going to do that because of Chubb and everything, but I think at some point the Browns are going to have to pass, and Cooper's the guy right there. Not, I guess you can mention Donovan Peoples-Jones as well, wherever he's priced, but where's he at?
4,600. Yep.
4,800, yeah. So
4,600. Yep. Or 4,800. Sorry. Yeah. 4,800. Yep. Definitely. Two guys I was going to mention. Not for cash games so much, but definitely for tournaments because you figure that they're going to have to pass. Just trying to see if there's any cheap, oh, yeah, there's a cheap guy we're going to have to talk about for cash because people are probably going to do it. You're going to have to monitor injury news here, but the Cardinals, yeah, so Rondale Moore, I believe he's going to be out, and he's been crushing as the slot receiver.
is it Dortch season? Oh,
Yeah, Dortch came in last week and had the best game of his career. 9 catches for 103 yards, and he's only 3,100.
He didn't practice Thursday. He has a thumb injury.
Yeah, I see that. I think he's going to be okay. I think he's okay from what I saw. The reason why I'm just not saying it's a lock is because Hollywood Brown is coming off the IR this week. They say he's going to be on a pitch count. But, even with Hollywood back, Dortch will be the slot guy, in sort of the Rondale Moore role. So he is in play. Keep an eye on news in that game.
Yeah, basically, if he's good to go at 3,100, he might be the most popular wide receiver in cash games.
He might be. It's interesting because sometimes you don't necessarily need that. Like, for instance, I don't think if we were to play like cheap running backs like Wilson, and if you got the Tampa guy as well, White, I'm not sure people would go down to Dortch just with Hollywood Brown back, at least in the higher stakes stuff. Mm-hmm. You're right, though, he's going to be popular. I mean, if Moore's out, but I just don't know that he's an absolute lock. It's not one of those slates where we got to pay 85 for Allen or 92 for Cooper Kupp, or so maybe.
So if we move to tight end here, this is, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but this is just like the dumbest position. It's dumb for DFS. It's dumb. It's dumb in regular fantasy. It's just like, okay, Kelsey's up here 7,700, Andrews is 6,500, then everyone else is almost 5K and below outside of Kittle here. It's just like, do you want to spend on these good guys, or do you just want to take a gamble on any of these cheap guys? It seems like there's always like one cheap tight end that everyone is kind of glued onto. So is there someone like that this week?
Yeah, well, you're right.
That it's dumb, or?
Well, yeah, sort of. For cash games, people don't like to spend up. It's usually not the move to spend up at tight end. So you're right. People get fixated on one sort of cheap guy. And in recent weeks, we've had plenty of good cheap options. I mean, just about every week. This week, right now, I think it's the weakest I've ever seen. Scrolling through these cheap tight ends, I mean, there's nothing really to love. I mean, if I had to pick one out, I think people will consider Foster Moreau. Like, let's start all the way down to Foster Moreau, 3,400. So he's like the start of the consideration, but again, not a great option. Going down, I think you could see people consider Logan Thomas now, like healthy and 5 catches last week. He's 3K, but I mean, there's really nothing here. Like, none of these guys, like Hayden Hurst for 3,300 had been projecting well. Now with Jamar Chase back, I don't know, that's pretty thin as well to go to someone like Hayden Hurst. I don't know. People have been playing Dulcich. He's 3,700. I would only consider that if Jerry Jeudy ended up being out again. I mean, don't love that. So I don't know, man. There's not much here. For tournaments, I guess, since we're at tight end, I'll mention one guy I like. I like Trey McBride for 3,100 on the Cardinals. He is Zach Ertz's replacement. He had 4 catches last week, and I think for that price, it wouldn't be that surprising if he scored a touchdown. But yeah, this is weak. The tight end position is very weak. But I still don't think people are going to spend up.
Are you looking at either Kelsey or Andrews for any of your lineups, or?
Yeah, I don't think Kelsey. I don't know, like that Chiefs game. That Chiefs game just it doesn't seem like one I want to stack. I don't know. Kelsey has a one-off, maybe. Yeah, I could see that. I don't know. I think I'd be more likely to take a shot on Andrews, though. Just the 1,200 price difference is enough for me. I don't know. I haven't been paying up at tight end, but that's because we'd had so many cheap options. You're right. We don't this week, so maybe for tournaments it's the right move.
Yeah, I wonder if, some of the game log watchers just look at what Andrews has done in the last couple games, and it's not as much as they want. So they see that and they're like, I don't see the current upside for him, so I'm not going to go there. So, I mean, he's always a guy that's in play for a touchdown and 100 yards in this offense. So,
Yep. You're right. I think that's a great point. That's exactly what I was thinking. He's cheaper than he's been. I mean, you look 7,400, 7,100, 7K, now 65. So yeah, I think you hit it. I think Mark Andrews in tournaments is a pretty good call. It's not the worst cash game play either. If we get all that value, it's not the worst cash game play.
there you go. Before we get into, I guess, defense, we got a little special something here for you. Ryan has some projections, but No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play and pick'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot of hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all your picks. Bet on up to 5-player prop on over-unders or individual player matchups across every major sports league, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Unfortunately, no soccer here, but sign up now with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to
Yeah.
miss out on this.
Yeah, so I checked out No House Advantage. I found a few over-unders that I really like, actually. Well, one seems like a slam dunk. That's Jeff Wilson. They got it set at 61.5 rushing yards. I mean, we talked about him already. He had 119 last week. He's got basically the best matchup in football this week. So slam dunk on Jeff Wilson's over 61. And then a couple receivers. The first one, I'm going to take Christian Kirk's over 56 over for Christian Kirk. 105 last week, 76 the week before. And this matchup against the Ravens, no one's been able to run on the Ravens. Their run defense has been really good recently. So, I mean, they're going to have to use Kirk, and they'll probably be playing from behind. So I like that one. And one more, I mentioned McLaurin. Going to be a bounce back week for McLaurin. His prop is at 70.5. So give me the over on McLaurin as well.
All right, so defense, I assume these conversations are usually pretty quick here, but you already mentioned, who did you mention here? You mentioned
The Chiefs.
The Chiefs.
2,800
cheap against the Rams. I mean, that's pretty, Stafford is already ruled out, so that's kind of what we're getting. They are already struggling with Stafford.
Yeah, right.
You mentioned the implied total here for him, and it's kind of a no-brainer in cash games.
Yeah, it's really a no-brainer. People would be rostering the Chiefs even if Stafford was playing, just because they've been a team to target with that shaky offensive line. People always go cheap defense in cash games, and there's not much else down here. So it's just, the Chiefs are a lock for cash games. If we look to try to get different in tournaments, two that stand out to me, I mentioned the Jets already for 3,300. I think that's a good spot. I think, Fields is a guy that can turn the ball over. and take sacks. So it's a great spot for the Jets and a great spot for the Commanders, whose defensive line is healthy now and actually one of the best defensive lines in football. Mariota doesn't have Kyle Pitts anymore. It should be a tough day for Mariota in Washington. So, I mean, I really like those three. I can't really see myself going anywhere else. I mean, does that anything else stand out to you?
I was just gonna say for tournaments like this Chiefs play, well, it is the no brainer in cash games, but
Yeah.
so Bryce Perkins is set to start here, and I've seen him play in college. I didn't catch what he did for the Rams last game, but he was a player who he's kind of a run first quarterback, and his accuracy was not the best. So it almost feels like Perkins is kind of going to be playing kind of like Justin Fields, to where he may have 15 to 20 carries, and that's going to that's going to reduce the amount of sacks that the Chiefs can get. Maybe they're still going
Yeah.
to allow 10 points or less, but if you don't get the
Yeah.
sack upside kind of a thing, then I think there are plenty of reasons not to pick the Chiefs in
Yeah.
tournaments.
Yeah, that's a good point. It also might reduce his interceptions. Um, and then another reason is they're going to be the most popular, and
Hmm.
it's always, obviously good game theory to fade that. There is one other thing I should mention. Crazy low total, 36 in the Broncos Panthers game. So either of those defenses are fine. Let's see, you got the Panthers 3K. And where are the Broncos are all the way up there. No one's I wouldn't roster the Broncos, but no one else will either. So I guess that's a reason too. That total is very low.
Yeah, do you ever spend up on defense? I just never can do it.
Yeah, no, I almost never can do it. The times I will is when we have like a 3K wide receiver or 4K running back, or like
Re-
when Justin Fields was 5K, and like maybe you get a min price tight end where you just have the money, or else
mhm.
I'm with you. No, no way.
All right, so that's kind of about it for cash games.
Yeah.
So we mentioned these two games we've been talking about: Raiders, Seahawks, Chargers, Cardinals. Those are going to be the most popular games. So what is the method if you still want to attack those games? What is the method to winning tournaments?
hmm Yeah,
Um,
good question. Um, well, so my favorite stack is the Cardinals Chargers matchup if I had to pick one. A few reasons. I think that game is going to be the fastest paced game on the slate. The Chargers play at the fastest situation neutral pace in the league. They also rank second in average play clock remaining. So it just leads to their games having a lot of points. And on the other side, the Cardinals lead the league in no huddle rate. So there's almost no chance this game doesn't have a lot of plays, at least in my opinion. Um, both the quarterbacks are affordable. They're both about the same price. Um, and there's a lot of good options on each side. Like, we mentioned Keenan Allen, great option. Kyler, Hopkins, Connor, Dortch, even that cheap tight end. I mean, this game's got everything. So you're right. Obviously other people are going to see this as well, and it's going to be popular. Um, there are ways to get different, and you don't have to get as different as you might think. This sort of has been a season of chalk smashing. Quite a few weeks in NFL, the chalk is smashed. People have been sort of upset that winning lineups have had such high cumulative ownership. So, it proves that it is possible. So you just need to get different in a few spots. There'll be ways to do that at running back. There'll be ways to do that at defense, tight end. So like if I stack that game, for example, maybe I won't play the chalkiest running backs. There's some, when we talk about some tournament options at running back, I'll talk about some maybe GPP options there. But yeah, I'm still going to be on that game. I like the spot too much. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you on that game maybe, or
Hmm.
do you like that other game? Or
How popular is Eckler going to be here? 8,500.
yeah, he's a good person to bring up because I'm planning on fading him, and
Okay.
I think other people will sort of think the same. And I actually wrote in my article uh, that he's a leverage play in this game. If you stack that game with Eckler, at least I think you'll be able to get a bit of, a bit of leverage. I think maybe that's why you were bringing him up. He's hard to afford at 8,500, and people are going to be on cheap running backs.
Eckler
So
Dortch. There you go.
yep, that's a good combo right there. Seriously. So yeah, I think yep, that's a good call. Way to get different in that game.
I
I
just
don't
want
know.
to
Do you
say
like
for
this?
that though, so that the this Cardinals 49ers game is fresh in my mind. I think it was that Monday night, Sunday night maybe. And it was just like the 49ers pretty much did whatever they wanted. It was like handoff to Debo or handoff even to whoever. It was just carving up Cardinals. Guys were wide open. What was it, 38-10 or something in that game? And then you throw Eckler in here, who, he does it all. He hasn't been as consistent as we've seen in prior seasons, but he is a guy with 30-point upside. And
Mhm.
if people are going to fade him because of something like that, I mean, it seems like a decent route as long as we don't project him to be too popular here.
Right. Yep. I agree with everything you said. And then I'll just throw in I guess, sort of my own personal take as to why I was considering the fade. Um, I'm slightly worried that the return of Keenan Allen is going to decrease some of that volume he's been seeing in the passing game. I mean, he's still going to catch passes, of course, but you see only 2 targets last week. I know that was one game, but that's the first game with Keenan Allen back. Keenan Allen catches a lot of short passes. Um, Not saying Eckler can't pay off that price tag. We see him with 3 touchdown games all the time, but that's just the reason that I was leaning towards a fade. But yeah, anyway.
That's a good
Yeah,
point. I
so,
mean, he really hasn't had that great of a rushing season. The Chargers' offensive line hasn't been that good. And then you look back to week one where Allen played a little bit. I think that's when he got his original injury. Eckler had just 4 targets there. So kind of backs up what you said. But so for tournaments, we're just going over positions again here. So you want to start back
yeah,
up with
well, let's
quarterbacks or?
let's touch on the Seahawks Raiders game.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Um, just because it's going to be another popular one and um I guess I guess I'll go to you. Like, do you have this Seahawks or Raiders? If you had to pick a side in that game, like, do you have a favorite side to stack?
I prefer the Seahawks. They're at home. The Raiders aren't that good. Their defense has been this bad for years. I can't remember the last time the Raiders actually had a good defense. Like what they got Max Crosby, and that's kind of it. Is what they currently have. So I mean, you can look. We mentioned the Kenneth Walker situation, but he's going to be popular.
Hmm.
So I'm probably not going to look that route. I'd rather like take the Geno Smith and those receivers route. That seems like the method that won't be as popular because the running backs are probably going to be more popular than the passing game in this because when you throw in the weather as well, that's kind of what everyone will be on. So, and I mean, we've seen this happens in the NFL. It's just like, oh, weather. I'm gonna fade the passing game kind of a thing. And even though I think both these defenses are terrible, and then it's like, oh, actually, even though it's 44 degrees, the sun is out, so it's kind of nice on the field, and maybe it doesn't even end up raining, and it's like, okay, Geno Smith just goes off for 300 yards and a few touchdowns, kind of a thing, because the Raiders aren't very good defensively. So that's kind
Yeah,
of my thoughts there.
I agree. I would be on the Seattle side as well. Definitely gonna want to pay attention to weather. You're right. Right up until kickoff, or at least just know what the weather's going to be. Because if it's going to be bad, I'm not going to force it. You're not going to want to play the passing game in that bad weather. But if it's going to be okay, yeah, I'm with you on the Seahawks side because I would want to play Devontae Adams. He's been going under owned every week. People just don't want to roster him because he struggled for a while, and just, well, Derek Carr did really. He had a few bad games, and people don't really. He's been so low owned the last 3 weeks, and he's had 30-plus fantasy points every week. I'm with you that I'd probably get off those chalky running backs and play Devontae Adams as a run back. You could also save a ton of money if you're on that game. You could save a ton of money and play Mac Hollins. 9 more targets last week, 6 catches, and like we know he has a ceiling now. Now that Renfro and Baller are not there, so yeah, that's what I do for that game.
I think it's almost been forgotten about that the Seahawks were actually kind of playing well, and then they went to a game in Germany against the Bucks where
Yep,
they lost that one, didn't look that great.
and they could have
But
won it.
yeah, before that, it's like 4 straight wins. They're putting up points against some bad defenses, but 27 against the Giants is respectable. And now I'm just kind of surprised here. I mean, we got the odds pulled up, only -3.5 you can get at DraftKings. It seems kind of off to me personally, just because the Raiders haven't really looked that good this season. Like, what does a win against the Broncos even mean this season?
Hmm.
So, I mean, you look at their prior games, they lost that Colts game, they lost the Jags, got shut out against the Saints. I'm not sure the Raiders have actually played a good game this season. 2 wins against the Broncos, 1 win against the Texans. And that Texans game, they put on, I think, a touchdown or 2 late to make that an 18-point game. So, I mean, not even DFS purposes, I'll just take -3.5 with the Seahawks. I think this is the spot for them, I think.
Yeah, I would lean Seahawks too. I agree. I think they're probably a little bit undervalued because people just still don't believe in Geno Smith. And I think probably that'll show up in the betting market a little bit at least. But I agree. I liked what I've seen, and I think their defense has been playing a lot better, especially at home. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I had the weather report pulled up, and we mentioned a little bit about the Bucks against the Browns, but that one currently 51 degrees, 73% chance of a rain. So you think that kind of throws off like the Tom Brady consideration in cash games?
Uh, yeah, if it's going to be bad weather for sure. Um, yeah,
And then
sorry, I was trying to look it up.
that would even increase like Rashad White then as well, I'd assume.
Yeah, I mean, that Fournette news, obviously keep an eye on it, but yeah, he'd be the most popular player on the slate if Fournette was out. Yeah, wow, I see. Yeah, good catch there. That game's supposed to have the worst weather on the slate. Okay, so yeah, that would definitely impact the passing game, and I might even have to think about Godwin. Although he's actually probably the guy you would want in that scenario. I mean,
Just getting the
he's been
short
running
crossers.
he's the routes he's been running have been so short. So you'd figure he'd get the targets in that game.
Yeah, if you want NFL weather, you just click the weather tab, and here you go. You can see all the weather here for all these games. Rain in this Broncos Panthers game, but we're not playing anyone from that game anyway, so I don't think it matters. Yeah, so just for tournaments here, what
Yeah.
for quarterback? Who's going to be the guy to get 30 points and 5% ownership?
Hmm. Yeah, what a question that is. Um,
Taylor Heineke. You think they're going to pass
yeah,
it that much though
yeah,
against the
no,
Falcons?
right. You never know. Honestly, though, that's the type of call for large field tournaments. Yeah, like a Taylor Heineke. I mean, just to talk about that stack for a second, it's pretty decent actually because it's so cheap, and you get Heineke, McLaurin. You could even throw in Logan Thomas, and then a run back that actually has some upside now is Drake London for 4,900. He's been very underwhelming recently, but with Pitts now gone, he's like all they got. So yeah, I think that's a Millie Maker type winning stack right there, or that $3.20 max tournament. Um, these type of cheap quarterback plays, yeah, less than 5% owned. You're right. As far as me, going to be heavy on Kyler and or Herbert, one of those sides. The other one I'll mention. So I think paying up for Mahomes or Lamar is okay because they're not going to be very popular. So if you wanted to stack one of those teams, fine. I think it makes sense, especially Baltimore. Just Lamar, Andrews, and like Christian Kirk, or even you could take a shot on Etienne. I know it's a bad matchup, but he catches passes. The one that I'm looking at is Miami. I think they're going to be less popular than you think they would be. Obviously, they're still going to carry ownership. It's a home matchup against the Texans. But people don't like to stack those blowout matchups, and I think this one's okay because some of the Texans run backs are pretty interesting to me. My favorite one would be Nico Collins, and I like Nico Collins. I think you could use him in other stacks as well. Even just they're probably going to be behind the whole game, and he's a guy that maybe could get you some leverage in some spots. Like we'll talk about some other cheap receivers, but Collins 5 catches in back-to-back games, and he's also got big play upside. So I could run it back with Collins. And then don't really need to say much about Tyreek. He's got his ceilings as high as anyone. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some Texans, I don't know, passing stacks in prior weeks, and I can't do it
Me
anymore.
too.
I can't do it.
It's never worked. It's never worked. I've tried it too. I know.
It was like beginning of the season. It was like, okay, maybe Davis Mills isn't that bad. He showed some sparks at times last year, but I know. I mean, you look at his game log, a couple 300-yard performances, but this team just is not good. So
yeah, okay, that's actually the perfect segue just to close it out. Instead, you could run it back with like a Dameon Pierce, so Dameon Pierce had been chalk the last 2 weeks and really disappointed. And now this week we have other backs who are going to be chalk. And there's a pretty good chance Dameon Pierce is going to get 20 plus touches here. You just need him to break one and find the end zone. I mean, if they can keep the game relatively close. So yeah, I don't mind that either.
I will say, just looking, we mentioned the Heineke, the Drake London part. So the Washington defense, Chase Young, I believe, is back now, and they're already a good rush defense. And the Falcons, they only like to run the ball. And we saw last week Dameon Pierce had 10 carries against them. And like maybe the Falcons take a different approach when Patterson, Algier, whoever is at like 1 yard after the first quarter, or they can't run the ball basically. So they're forced to pass. So that goes back to what you're saying with Drake London. So that's the kind of thinking there with a stack in that game.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We're getting a question here back to cash games. Pacheco at 5,500 for cash games. Any consideration?
Yeah, JP. I like Pacheco this week. Just not for cash. He's a tournament play because he doesn't catch passes, and there's too many good running backs in that range this week. Like you won't be able to. You can't play him over like a Jeff Wilson or Kenneth Walker even up top, or Rashad White if Fournette's out. So I do like Pacheco. That could be a good game script for him. 100-yard game last week. He's got touchdown upside, but a tournament play.
So yeah, for running backs though, we mentioned Eckler. I don't think McCaffrey is the guy here. He's not going to be popular. I doubt he's going to be popular, but I guess that makes him in play here. Who stands out? It's probably like Walker and Jacobs are the guys, it seems like. But they'll be the popular ones.
So for tournaments, right? Like, I'm not the type that's going to play a popular Josh Jacobs in tournaments. So yeah, I'll look for somebody else. Up top, I'm going to side with King Henry, the big dog. He's just so good, and I love him at home. I love the way they use him. Sometimes he catches passes, sometimes he throws passes, and he has huge upside. So I'll try to get to Derrick Henry on some lineups. Is there any like sort of contrarian-ish guy you're looking at?
I'll have one. I'm just looking at the Titans-Bengals matchup last year. Henry, 20 carries, 62 yards.
Not great. Not great. Sorry,
Yeah,
I should say I was before you finish. I saw Nick Chubb just run them over a couple weeks ago, and that was sort of stuck in my head. But yeah, that last week or that matchup last year is slightly worrying.
yeah, we have that playoff game, but I believe the
Oh, that
Bengals
was a
are
playoff
coming.
game.
Yeah, the Bengals are coming off a bye as well, and like they're
Mm-hmm.
known for their defensive coordinator being like one of the best at game planning, one of the best in the second half at turning games around, kind of thing. Now you get the extra week to plan against Henry and this pretty bad uh, Titans passing offense. So I mean, you look at that last game and what the Bengals are, how they're going to attack them. So those are my thoughts with Henry.
Okay.
But
Yeah, it can
I
be
mean,
talked off.
he always has the upside, but that's kind of
Right.
what I think there.
No, but I mean, it's not like it's not something that it's not like a strong take or anything I have. I could be talked into McCaffrey. I'm with you. I think he's like a little expensive and probably won't get that much ownership, but that's okay. He's got huge upside. So I think he'd be fine for tournaments too, obviously.
Hmm. I don't think anyone stands out just looking through the list like Connor and Pierce, the guys we already talked about. But I don't think there's like one play here. Like we even mentioned Akers already. Um,
Oh, we got one more thing to talk about. I just saw Joe Mixon might be out this week with that concussion. It actually seems
oh,
like he's going to be out. Now, here's the thing: with all this cheap value, Samaje Perine is not the cash play with this
56.
other value. He's never a guy that's going to get a ton of carries. He will be involved in the passing game, but I don't expect him to be like the workhorse. So I think it'd be a fine play in tournaments, but I would not go there in cash. People are going to see that 3 touchdown game last against Pittsburgh. I mean, but I'm just telling you, it's not a cash play.
Yeah, it looks like Travion Williams got some touches as well last week after Mixon went down. Not saying he's going to take Pirine's role, but I think he's a guy who caught a lot of passes at Texas A&M, so
Yeah,
probably take
it's
some of those
just
receptions as well.
yeah. P Ryan is not going to be like a 3 down workhorse.
Hmm. Yeah, but that's I don't know. That's kind of really it
Yeah,
for
I mean,
running backs, unless I don't see really any long
no, that's
shots I
it.
want to consider.
That's it. Receivers for tournaments. We sort of mentioned all three of these top guys already. Hill, Adams, Hopkins. Obviously, they all make sense. Chase coming back this week. You got to keep an eye on news with that one. I wouldn't want to play him if he's limited, but this is one of those where not many people are going to play him. At least I don't think so. Yeah, not many people are going to play him. They're just not, especially for the same price as Hopkins. So I think Chase is fine. I think if you want to take, that's a gamble. Obviously, that's a gamble, but it's one that might be worth taking. Um, let's see, going down more. We talked about this 6K range is loaded. I'm going to be on those guys that we talked about pretty much. I'll mention some cheap guys first. There's a lot of cheap receivers in play for tournaments this week. I guess starting at the top of the 5K range. So we mentioned Drake London. Drake London, good play for 4,900. They should be passing. No Pitts. We mentioned Peoples Jones, 4,800. If that weather's going to be crazy, you might want to be off of Peoples Jones. Going down more, Mac Hollins, 4,400 is interesting. Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson was the chalk last week at 4,900. People played him in cash games. People played him everywhere. He busted. Now he's down to 4,300, so you could take a chance on Garrett Wilson. And then Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks had a monster game against the Packers. 7 catches, 111 yards. So you could take a shot on Burks. I mentioned Nico Collins for 4,100. I don't mind taking a shot on Nico Collins. We mentioned Dortch for 3,100. So it's loaded this week. Cheap wide receiver is loaded this week. You can take a chance on any of these guys. I don't know. Did you have any thoughts? Or maybe you had somebody, there's a lot of chalk in this 6K range. I guess you mentioned Amari Cooper's a decent pivot. like who would be sort of the leverage play in this
I
range?
think that like you can. So we got. I'm just gonna bring up. Maybe it's stupid or, or
No, maybe it's not.
I don't think anyone's gonna do it. But we got Chris Olave at
Yeah.
6,600, and we have Ayuk at 6,400. So Debo Samuel hamstring, not gonna be 100%, even if he starts or even if he plays, not 100%. So I mean, you have those guys in that game. I mean, the Saints defense really hasn't been that good. So you think if, 49ers get an early lead kind of a thing, it's going to be Dalton chucking the ball a lot. Olave gets a lot of those passes, gets a lot of those targets. It seems like he's always in play for
Yep.
100 plus yards kind of a thing. And I
Yep.
mean,
I
he's
think
in this
that's the
range
right
with
call.
all these other guys who are going to be popular.
Yep.
So
I think that's the exact right call. Yep. He's not going to be popular, and you're not like taking a big step down. He's still a good play with a ton of upside. Um, the last thing I'll say is keep an eye on the status of Mike Williams, yet to practice this week. If he were to be out, Josh Palmer would continue to be a good play, even with Keenan Allen. I mean, it'd be Palmer and Keenan Allen. You look at Palmer's log, he's been crushing. 8 catches again last week, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, keep an eye on the Mike Williams news.
is there any reason to make a pivot to DeAndre Carter?
Yeah, in tournaments, that's another good guy to bring up. Absolutely, if Mike Williams is out, absolutely, because that's like a little bit of a different dynamic. We've seen like you'd almost like DeAndre Carter more than in these other weeks where it's been Keenan out and Mike Williams in there, because like Mike Williams is sort of their deep threat, big play threat, touchdown threat. Keenan doesn't always run the deepest routes. So yeah, I think Carter would benefit from Mike Williams being out.
I'd say another boost is like Gerald Everett's coming back from a groin injury, but he didn't miss much time with it. What if he tweaked his groin again in the game and Gerald Everett basically plays as a wide receiver even though he's listed as a tight end?
Yep,
So that's
yep,
another
and
reason why like a guy like Carter could get more snaps than we even think he's going to get. So
yep, absolutely.
speaking for tight ends, do you have anything
Tight
else to say on
ends,
tight ends?
yeah. Actually, what you just said,
Okay.
Gerald Everett is playable as well. Actually, Gerald Everett is playable also. If Mike Williams is out, you just see tight ends weak this week, and Gerald Everett 8 targets, 9 targets before this last game, 5 catches in 3 straight. So I definitely think you could just Herbert, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett. It's pretty good right there. Run it back with Connor or Hopkins. So yeah, I don't mind that. Mentioned Andrews at the top. I think Andrews is the move at the top. And yeah, I mentioned the guy. I like this Trey McBride, 3,100. But yeah, tight end is not great.
hmm You got any thoughts for specific positions or anything?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered pretty much everything. Um,
You don't have a suggestion of which defense is going to get a touchdown?
Yeah, I mean those ones that we mentioned. I mean, I really like those better than all the rest. Specific defense to get a touchdown.
49ers when Andy Dalton is just chucking the ball around when they're down by 14
Yeah,
points in the first half.
you could definitely see that. I mean, there's a lot of home defenses in good spots. The Dolphins against Davis Mills. I could see actually Washington against Mariota. I could see that for sure. Um, yeah, there's a lot of home defenses in good spots this week.
Yeah, kind of the situation we mentioned. If the Falcons don't have success running the ball, Mariota's going to have to throw it. You got
Mm,
Chase Young back, and Washington
man,
has already been playing
yeah.
pretty well defensively. So
Yeah, that defensive line is good now with Chase Young back. I think they have 3 first rounders on that defensive line. Yeah, it's yeah.
I don't know. They might be too popular. Back-to-back games with touchdowns, and I'm seeing it.
Yeah, but luckily they won't because they're 3,600 and because Chiefs are chalk.
All right. I guess before I have a couple more questions. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL actions you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. A monkey knife fight. There's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win. Daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit match instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. Is there anything else left to say? How are we going to win $1 million? How are we going to win some GPPs here? Is it with the matchups, the games we already talked about with the Chargers, Cardinals, Raiders, Seahawks? Is that how we're going to win?
Yeah. So for me, hopefully, I play 20 GPP lineups every week, and I play only single entries, 3 max, 5 max. So for me, I don't have to go quite as contrarian or crazy leverage spots. But if somebody's going to win $1 million, man, I think I like your Heineke call. Heineke, McLaurin, London, something like that. That looks like one of the better sort of off the board stacks to me. And then 2 more. I mentioned Lamar. No one's going to play Lamar, of course, because he hasn't been great, but him, Andrews, and someone from the Jags, maybe that's going to be low owned. And then I'll just mention this one because this guy has won so many tournaments for people when nobody plays him, and that's Joe Burrow. So no one's going to play Burrow. He's ended up in the winning lineup so many times the last 2 years. You could run something back with Treylon Burks if you don't want to use Derrick Henry. I don't know, some ideas.
All right, I kind of screwed this up here. I overlooked the weather report in Washington. 46 degrees, 87% chance of rain.
Okay. It didn't seem like, obviously it's early, early on Friday here. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on all weather. It looks good from what I'm looking at. From what I'm looking at, it's going to be okay. You're right, chance of rain, but conditions should be fine for passing from what I'm seeing. But yeah, keep an eye on it.
Okay. Yeah, cool. I'll do a single entry Heineke lineup. We'll see if I can get Laster first. We'll see what happens.
Maybe I'll actually just for the purposes of the show, I'll make one for my for one of my lower stakes entries.
Fine, if you don't want to win that much money, I guess. All right, you got anything else here for this show?
I don't think so. I think that was a good summary.
Awesome. All right, so good luck to everyone for Sunday's 11-game slate. You can find Ryan at Ryan Belongia. I'm at Zdroik on Twitter. If you're into all kinds of DFS, we're doing all this soccer content for the World Cup. DraftKings has bigger contests for some of these games. We got a big showdown between USA and England on Friday, but of course that's 2 hours from now, so you're probably listening to this after that game. But good luck to everyone, and Scott and Ryan will be here next week to talk DFS.
Yep. Thanks, Adam. Good luck, everybody.